Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker, and in this video we absolutely must talk about my former religion, Jehovah's Witnesses, attacking Richard Dawkins, renowned biologist and atheist thinker, or at least attacking his words as blasphemous. This came as a surprise to me when I was browsing jw.org and their video section last night. I absolutely had to share it with you. We're about to watch a morning worship speech by Alex Reinmueller. Alex Reinmueller is a helper to the governing body. Interestingly, we don't see him quite as much as the other governing body helpers. He wasn't used at all during the 2020 Always Rejoice convention. So he's a little bit sidelined when it comes to the spotlight. But in any case, he is presenting the following video, which has the theme, Jehovah our God is one Jehovah.
A newspaper in Japan once quoted a Catholic priest. He said, "The God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, is a God of anger, and I can't feel close to him." And then he added, "But he developed and transformed into what is the God of the New Testament, that is, the God of love whom Jesus taught." Have you ever heard that? A lot of people still think like this, as if God has a split personality. They're uncomfortable when they read in the Bible that God gets angry sometimes. Why is that? First, there are outspoken critics in this world who constantly try to discredit Jehovah. A prominent biologist, for example, made headlines a few years ago. He said in his book, "The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction." I stopped the quote there because it gets much worse. But how blasphemous a viewpoint that is. The more often people hear statements like this, the more they tend to believe them.
Oh dear, people believing things that you don't agree with. Wow. So Alex Reinmueller there quotes Richard Dawkins. That is the biologist he was referring to. And interestingly, if you type in Dawkins on Watchtower Online Library, so their repository of information online of most of their publications going back to, well, the 70s really, or the 50s if we're discussing Watchtower articles. In any case, this is decades worth of their literature. And if you type in Dawkins, you get 21 results. Not all of them are Richard Dawkins, but the majority of them are referring to or quoting from Richard Dawkins. They don't seem to like him or his views, and this time they've gone one step further by just outright calling his views blasphemous. Wasn't it interesting how they don't name him? So Jehovah's Witnesses watching this aren't readily able to discern who it is that's being referred to as blasphemous. And they also don't say where the quote comes from. It comes from the book The God Delusion, which I'm sure many of you have at least heard of, including those of you who perhaps watch my channel who are not atheists, who are still religious. I'm sure you've heard of this book. But the quote in question comes from the opening words of chapter 2. Alex Reinmueller doesn't want Jehovah's Witnesses to hear the full quote. He cuts the quote off at,
"The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction." I stopped the quote there because it gets much worse.
That is slammed as blasphemous. The rest is basically described as so outrageous that Jehovah's Witnesses can't hear it, basically. They're not allowed to hear the rest of the quote. Alex Reinmueller is, in my view, doing Jehovah's Witnesses thinking for them, telling them what is acceptable or not acceptable for them to hear. If he's going to be honest, or if he's going to quote from someone like Richard Dawkins, accusing them of being blasphemous, at least give us the name Richard Dawkins and the book so that Jehovah's Witnesses can go away and see for themselves what was said. The fact that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't given that information, I think, is kind of insulting their intelligence and infantilizing them, because it's suggesting that it would be too dangerous for them to listen to what this biologist has to say. So it's not just some random dude who has blasphemous views, it's a biologist. You're relying on the fact that this is someone with academic credentials. Why not let people decide for themselves? The full quote, which I'll read the paragraph if you don't mind. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Those of us schooled from infancy in his ways can become desensitized to their horror. A knife blessed with the perspective of innocence has a clearer perception. Winston Churchill's son Randolph somehow contrived to remain ignorant of Scripture until Evelyn Waugh and a brother officer, in a vain attempt to keep Churchill quiet when they were posted together during the war, bet him he couldn't read the entire Bible in a fortnight. Unhappily, it has not had the result we hoped. He has never read any of it before and is hideously excited, keeps reading quotations aloud, I say, I bet you didn't know this came in the Bible, or merely slapping his side and chortling, God, isn't God a shit? Thomas Jefferson, better read, was of a similar opinion, describing the God of Moses as a being of terrific character, cruel, vindictive, capricious, and unjust. And I have to agree. Obviously, I'm an atheist. You might say, if you're a believer watching this, well, you're going to agree, aren't you? But that does describe the God of the Old Testament, and I would go one step further and disagree with this idea that God somehow improves in the New Testament. I have actually made a video with my friend Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic, which has had, I think, over 200,000 views, where we go over examples, 20 examples of terrible ideas that you can find in the New Testament. So I don't subscribe to this idea that God has this split personality where he's a monster in the Old Testament and suddenly this fantastic being in the New Testament. No, I think there's consistency, to be honest. But anyway, let's hear Alex Reinmueller's explanation for this perceived split personality.
So, why does a God of love get angry sometimes? Well, the answer is quite simple. When rebels challenged Jehovah's sovereignty, he had to defend his name and standards. Rebellion did make him angry, and rightly so. But Jehovah's anger is always under control and guided by right principles. As a father, he had to protect his household. Respect for his own name and his love for his children compelled him to act. Did you notice that Jesus said those not exercising faith will be destroyed? So Jehovah's personality didn't mellow over the years as if it needed mellowing. It didn't transform from one personality to another. His severity today against the wicked is no less, nor his love any greater than it was in the past. Jehovah does not change.
Well, on that, Alex Reinmueller and I can agree. I, again, don't think God does change between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I don't buy into this idea that he somehow mellows. In Leviticus 20, verse 13, you have an injunction for gay people to be executed. That's nowhere reversed in the New Testament. If anything, they double down on this idea, or at least the Apostle Paul doubles down on this idea that homosexuality is some form of abomination. And as Alex Reinmueller points out, there's still the same judgmentalism. There's still this idea of worship me or die.
Did you notice that Jesus said those not exercising faith will be destroyed?
Tell me how great I am for all eternity, or you're going to be destroyed. That's all there in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, God was dealing directly with a people, and he got to administer his justice, his vindictive retribution in the here and now. In the New Testament, it's just switched to being some future thing where if you disappoint God in any way, including by having the wrong sexuality, for example, you will be destroyed, or according to mainstream Christianity, be tormented forever. And as I point out in my video with Alex, there are verses that hint strongly towards eternal torment, even though that's something that Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in. Anyway, back to Alex Reinmueller.
We can illustrate it like this, perhaps. Criminals may know that a police officer is an arm of the law. His children may see him as a loving father that he is, and his close friends may value him for his good sense of humor. Now, the police officer, the father, and the friend are all the same person. In each situation, a different aspect of his personality stands out. And it's the same with Jehovah. In harmony with his name, he causes to become or becomes whatever he needs to in every situation in order to fulfill his purpose, especially his purpose towards those who love him. So, if we want to get closer to Jehovah, we have to accept the full range of his beautiful, multifaceted, and unchanging personality. Very soon now, as Zechariah 14 and verse 9 predicts, Jehovah must become king over all the earth. And in that day, the prophet said, Jehovah will prove to be one, and his name one. Everyone in heaven and on earth will agree at that time that Jehovah our God is the universal sovereign. And you and I will gladly join our voices with that happy chorus. What a beautiful prospect that is.
I do occasionally receive feedback from viewers who subscribe to more mainstream versions of Christianity. And they say, oh, well, Lloyd, because you've been raised as a Jehovah's Witness, because you've been raised in fundamentalist Christianity, you just don't understand that there's a more elevated way of reading the Bible. There's a more nuanced way of understanding God's personality. It's not as black and white as Jehovah's Witnesses or other fundamentalist groups make out. He's actually all about love, and we ought to somehow disregard or explain away the more outrageous sides to God's character that you find in the Bible, such as his hatred of gay people. I'm sorry, I don't buy into this idea that I'm just reading the Bible wrong as an atheist, or that Jehovah's Witnesses and other fundamentalist groups are adding to the Bible. I think at least when it comes to the judgmental, psychotic, megalomaniac side of God, they're just being honest. They are simply sticking to what the Bible itself says. if you're going to water down the Bible, if you're going to just cherry pick the bits that make God sound good and ignore the parts where God is open about how psychotic and misogynistic and abusive and toxic he is, well, that's just intellectual dishonesty. You take God's description of himself as related through his inspired word at face value, or you don't. I don't think that's oversimplifying things if we're talking about, again, a book that's supposed to have been communicated through Holy Spirit as a message to mankind, telling us who our Creator is and what he has planned for us. It's extremely dishonest to cherry pick. And that's, again, why I don't buy into this idea that God changes in the New Testament, which it seems, at least on that point, Alex Reinmueller and I agree. But again, I just find it extremely disingenuous that they should slam Richard Dawkins as being blasphemous without giving Jehovah's Witnesses the opportunity to know, first of all, that it is Richard Dawkins, and second of all, where it is that he says these things so that they can see for themselves what it was that was said and what justification is offered for what was said. And quite frankly, I have a problem with the whole idea of blasphemy, to be honest. As I know does Richard Dawkins. I think either Richard or someone else said blasphemy is a victimless crime. Well, you're going to think that as an atheist. You're going to think, well, who is it that's suffering as a result of blasphemy if we have no reasonable evidence to conclude that God exists? But I suppose my question to believers like Alex Reinmueller would be, who gets to decide what is blasphemy? Are you not blaspheming Catholics and other religions when you claim them to be false religion or part of the harlot, Babylon the Great? Is that not blasphemy, at least from their perspective? So I guess my point is, this whole idea of blasphemy, it's completely subjective, isn't it? Atheists are blasphemers from the point of view of believers, and believers can be blasphemers from the point of view of other believers who have different views. And yet, rather than blasphemy being some abstract idea, just some concept, it has very real-world consequences in countries where blasphemy is not just a crime, but in some cases, a crime that can get you killed, a crime that can get you executed. If you are a believer, and especially if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you take nothing else away from this video, I want you to think about that. Think about the fact that blasphemy is really a victimless crime, and it's entirely subjective when it comes to deciding who is or who isn't blaspheming. You could be executed as a blasphemer in a Muslim country for expressing your Christian views. So do we really want to be, in the 21st century, getting behind this idea that blasphemy is a thing? Isn't it so much easier to let people express their views freely and allow people to decide for themselves whether those views make sense? But that's all I have to say on this extraordinary footage from jw.org. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.